Professor Fatic, you are the founder, the author of a new and modern method or school of psychotherapy, which is called modal integrative psychotherapy. And it is based on modal logic and is philosophically founded. You often comment on the way in which our education impacts our welfare and about the nature of the universities and the way in which universities have degraded over the past several decades in the West and have entered into a crisis which is now obviously the subject of a large amount of commentaries and discussions in the academic and policy communities. You have also taught at various universities over the past 30 or so years. What is your impression of the way universities have changed during that period?
Well, I've seen a lot of changes in the universities since 1996 at least. I think the main change has been what I would describe as a gradual abandonment of scholarship. All universities in the Western Hemisphere, those universities that model themselves after the once leading Western universities, have succumbed to this corporatist, capitalist culture and this corporate language, and as a consequence also to the corporate way of thinking. And they gradually abandoned the traditional role of universities in a democratic society, and that is the role of educators, of institutions which create both professionals and good citizens. And instead, the universities have turned into some kind of businesses, educational businesses, institutions which basically focus on catering to the job market and not on creating smart people. There are still smart people both within the ranks of the university staff and many smart students, but these people don't get their place, their deserved place in modern universities. When modern universities hire staff, they focus on people who can bring them money, and they can bring them money in at least two ways. One is by attracting project funding, projects from foundations and donors. And to do this, academics have to be very entrepreneurial, they have to be technically savvy in project writing, and most importantly, they are typically not particularly scholarly because they spend all of their time. It's physically impossible for them to read, it's physically impossible for them to think deeply and to consider the key issues of life or of their profession, or key technical issues even in the technical sciences, because they spend all of their time writing applications and mingling and lobbying, and they do some teaching, and they have to write a little bit in order to get published, in order to get promoted. So they have no time to read. It's easily provable. It's physically impossible for them to be scholarly, to be contemplative, to be intellectual leaders. And this is all and this is the first way in which academics can bring funding to the universities. The second way is for them to be celebrities, and as celebrities to help universities attract large numbers of fee-paying students, which has been the case in many Western universities over the past several decades. So the academics are under pressure to either be influencers, academic influencers, celebrities, or to be project writers. Now, if they want to be celebrities, then they have to be prolific writers, and the result of this is that you have so many academics who write an incredible amount. They write books like 500-page books every 6 months. And again, this means that they are not scholarly because they have no time to read, they have no time to think. Just add up the time required to write that amount, and even if no effort went to establishing links with publishers and the actual publication process and revisions, even if that was all ideal and it all went to print straight from their computers, they would still not have time to do anything else. So the outcome of this corporatization of universities has been a de-intellectualization of the academia. And this is the reason we now feel that the Western academia is largely superfluous, and that we are now expecting various elite groups, including societal leaders, to gradually abandon university education and opt for alternatives. Jordan Peterson just established an online university, and I think there will be such initiatives will mushroom very soon, because there are very smart people, very scholarly people out there who are fed up with this kind of university culture, which is destroying what they had worked for all their lives, because they are forced to basically produce an enormous amount of what is basically intellectual rubbish. These are papers that nobody reads, nobody has time to read them. It is physically impossible for anyone to read that amount of published work. And they are manically cited, and even when you look at the way in which publishers actually lay out those papers, you see that they often have, when you Google those papers, they appear with the title and the author's affiliations and a link to a quick citation, so that you don't need to read, you don't need to look at page numbers, you really don't need to open the file. You can just see the title, read the abstract, or skim through the abstract. In most cases, that's what people do, and then cite in order to beef up your citation base for your own paper, which you know nobody will read other than the reviewers and perhaps the editor. So the universities have changed in a way that they are committing a suicide. They are becoming businesses, and the most disappointing aspect of it is the fact that academics have embraced this culture, and they have agreed to be lab rats. They have agreed to perceive themselves as the more valuable, the more funding they bring to the university, or the more students they can attract, or the more papers and books they can publish. And all of this is basically degrading the quality of intellectual life in our society, and it's almost as though we would be better off without such universities, because they are basically drowning our culture and our scholarship under a pile of hyper produced material, and under a culture that is so corporate and so profit driven that everything in education is now service and a business. Students who enroll in universities, they tailor their expectations as per the advertisements and university policies and university missions and the speeches that they receive from vice chancellors and deans when they come on their first day to the campus. And they are led to believe from the very first day at the university that they are there to gain what I would describe as more or less vocational skills in order to get a job at the job market. And the language the universities use to communicate to their students is no longer a scholarly language. It is now a corporate language. They talk about the job market, the publication pipeline, the profits, the added value, and things like that. So when you use that kind of language, you basically program the minds of the students to not think in terms of scholarship and knowledge and wisdom and citizenship and the deep understanding of their disciplines, but rather to think in terms of superficial, short-term personal gain. And I think that's the major way in which Western universities have increasingly made themselves irrelevant over the past several decades.
Why did you come back to your home country when you were the youngest tenured professor in the state? When you lived in the West and you were working at a major Western university, so what made you come back to your country?
Well, that's an interesting question. I came back because it seemed to be more interesting to be back in a region that at the time was more challenging, and it seemed to me that there was more space for innovation than in a well-established Western academic environment. So I came back to witness a situation in which the Eastern European region over the past few decades has basically been streamlined with the Western academic culture. So the differences that were there that attracted me to come back are no longer there. We are all now Western universities. We all follow the same kind of policies and the same kind of culture. So the reason I came back was because I thought that there was more room for creativity in a less ordered region, and a region that had more available space for a rearrangement of academic systems and social circumstances that were relevant to the operation of universities. But unfortunately, the direction universities in Eastern Europe have taken has basically followed the same pattern as that which has degraded the Western universities.
Would you like to go abroad again now, perhaps as an educational leader, dean or vice chancellor? Where would you like to go? Do you think you would be able to make a difference?
Well, the global south is what used to be Eastern Europe for me when I came back. The global south is the new world. It is the region of the new superpowers, China and India. Superpowers, population-wise, politically, diplomatically, and they have the potential to be superpowers academically. Now, the question that seems to me to be open, to still be open, is which direction this superpower status, the acquisition of this superpower status academically in these countries will take. And it seems to me that there's still space for these countries to rely on the more traditional and more creative values and strategies arising from their long and rich intellectual and spiritual and social traditions, and revive the original concept and the original structure and organization and the original contribution that the university makes to society, which has been lost in the more modern university business, which has taken over the university as a social institution in the West. In addition, I like colors, I like differences, I like people in the global south, and would likely feel happier there than in more sterile and more regulated and more mentally restricted environments. And I think such divergence, such variance of identities, and such cultural creativity and cultural richness is an environment that may nourish sufficiently brave university leaders and academic policymakers to capture this chance for the Global South academia to become a superpower academia, to become the academia where the truly promising and truly ambitious students will flock from around the world, rather than sending their own young men and women to attend increasingly poor and restrictive academic institutions in the West.
What is it about the Global South that attracts you?
Well, the Global South is what used to be Eastern Europe for me when I came back. The Global South is the new world. It is the region of the new superpowers, China and India. Superpowers, population-wise, politically, diplomatically, and they have the potential to be superpowers academically. Now, the question that seems to me to be open, to still be open, is which direction this superpower status, the acquisition of this superpower status academically in these countries will take. And it seems to me that there's still space for these countries to rely on the more traditional and more creative values and strategies arising from their long and rich intellectual and spiritual and social traditions, and revive the original concept and the original structure and organization and the original contribution that the university makes to society, which has been lost in the more modern university business, which has taken over the university as a social institution in the West. In addition, I like colors, I like differences, I like people and the Global South, and would likely feel happier there than in more sterile and more regulated and more mentally restricted environments. And I think such divergence, such variance of identities, and such cultural creativity and cultural richness is an environment that may nourish sufficiently brave university leaders and academic policymakers to capture this chance for the Global South academia to become a superpower academia, to become the academia where the truly promising and truly ambitious students will flock from around the world, rather than sending their own young men and women to attend increasingly poor and restrictive academic institutions in the West.
You are an applied philosopher and founder of Model Integrative Psychotherapy. How do you think that psychotherapy can be applied to university management?
Yes, well, philosophical practice is teaching as a form of counseling, as a form of psychotherapy, because there's one fundamental principle that governs all psychotherapy, and that is that what causes us to change, to improve, and to grow are not psychotherapeutic techniques or schools or, interventions, but the relationships that we establish with our therapists or counselors. And the same principle applies to academic life. Deans and vice chancellors should be therapists. They should be people that their colleagues refer to when they have professional and non-professional problems. They should be fatherly and motherly figures. They should be people who are there to nourish and support their staff and not regulate and whip them into productivity patterns and things like that. They are not line managers. They are leaders of academic communities, and I think a lot of the problems with university culture is focused on the wrong philosophy adopted by academic vice chancellors and deans. They become so sucked in to the Excel tables and their efficiency and productivity matrix that they forget why they are there, and they are there not to produce an enormous amount of paper, so not to generate a situation where the departments, faculties, and universities produce a huge number of publications or attract tens of thousands of students if they are large universities. But they are there to be the light. They are there to use their life experience, their wisdom, their calmness, their balance, their scholarship to impart that kind of intellectual spell on their colleagues and on their institutions. And by doing that, they will motivate their colleagues and students to excel far more than if they behave as line managers.
Do you think that universities in the Global South will use this opportunity?
I don't know. I sincerely hope so. I don't see them doing that at the moment because they are basically following the Western model, and we see all these problems with predatory publishing and with the faking of results, and which sometimes reaches bizarre proportions, and this pressure on academics to be productive and to deliver. So at the moment, what is visible in the Global South is the same thing that happened to Eastern Europe, and that was that Eastern European universities simply became Western universities. They are now Western universities with all their advantages and their limitations. Will the countries of the Global South change their course? Well, they may do so, and I do hope that they will. They have the chance to do it because they have the majority of the world's population. They have a young population. They have the numbers of students, and you could see that based on how many campuses Western universities are opening in the Middle East and in Asia, because they're declining. They face declining student numbers in the West and increasing student numbers in the Global South. And this energy of youth and this enthusiasm about the newly found national romanticism and regional romanticism and identity quests of the Global South is something that offers an opportunity for people in the Global South to solidify their social and economic structures and to project themselves as world leaders in the academia, rather than simply following the legacy of colonialism and of simply acquiescing in a culture that has been imposed on them from the Western societies. So I think there is a chance, there is an opportunity, and the window of opportunity of this opportunity might not be too long. It may exist for another 5 or 6 or up to 10 years, I think. And if the universities in the Global South and the societies in the Global South do not come to their senses and start hiring really good, really wise people who can be the light, they might actually turn off the light for good and sentence themselves to the same fate as the Western universities which are failing. There's already significant research about the so-called post-university society, because universities are in such a decline that we simply must think about the post-university society in the West. I do hope that the societies in the Global South will not allow that to happen to their universities, and that they will recruit ship captains who can steer their ships in directions where they will find bountiful tropical islands and quiet seas and will reap the benefits of growing their intellectual culture on the basis of scholarship, wisdom, citizenship, societal awareness, sociality, and organicism, whilst keeping the business aspects of organization of the university in check and largely marginal to the very identity and very essence of the university, in the way in which the university was envisaged to be organized, and it actually functioned until some 10 to 15 years ago, even in the West. So I do hope that the universities in the Global South will understand that they need to look, to actively look for people who have the spark to ignite the process of change, where they will suddenly look into themselves and find that they are the magnets that draw people in, rather than being a part of the crowd that where everybody is running in the same direction, and that direction is basically academic doom. So Global South is the region of hope, the region of future, the region of legitimate and potentially happy future for the academia. It is the region where universities have a future, if they have a future at all. If in 20 or 30 or 50 years we will still have universities as important societal actors, I think that will be in the Global South. If the academic policy makers change their course and use the opportunities that they now have.